So I am live and I'm going to be using Lightroom today. This is my first real test going live on YouTube. And I figure since I do a lot of editing, it would be good to get my YouTube channel to display how I edit the photos and kind of give everyone an idea on the photos I will be posting soon. So here I have some photos imported from a small little trip yesterday. I have 60 photos to import, and the first thing I like to do is kind of give keywords to every photo. And as I go down through here, I can push Control A to select all of them. And I am in library mode, so I can go over here under keyword tags, and I'm just going to put winter as one of the tags since these were all taken in the winter. And I can select a few of the photos now, so I know these ones are from Bald Eagle Creek, so I'll add Bald Eagle Creek to this. These ones I select next are from the West Branch Susquehanna River. And the one with the ducks are from Fishing Creek. The photos of the lake are from Bald Eagle State Park. Also known as Sayers Lake, as Foster Joseph Sayers Lake to be specific. And the last three are from Beach Creek. And you can add in more tags, but I just like to kind of give a location to all of my photos before I start editing them. It helps me better organize them for the future, helps me find them later. So these first three photos are from Bald Eagle Creek, and it's more of a document photo. I wanted to get a look at the river level for this photo, and I was using a 89mm. I'm surprised I didn't go in further. Oh, this one's in further. There we go. So this is a 250mm photo, and cropped in you can kind of get an idea of the creek level. And you still can't see the exact level because there's some ice across the pillar here. But to better get this one for a document, I'm going to crop it in even more on Lightroom. So you go to the crop overlay tool here and simply move your box in closer, and you can go in pretty far sometimes, especially for a document photo. You're just displaying the numbers and nothing really creative or photography included on this shot. And it looks a little dark, so you can put the exposure up a little bit, and here you can see there's lots of contrast, so you could take contrast away with your contrast, or I like to do the individual layers, so I'll take the highlights down a bit and put the shadows up a little bit, give some more detail on the side of the bridge pier there. And that's about it for that photo. So this next one, I thought this was kind of cool when you see the rocks on top of the ice. It kind of shows how thick the ice is. I'm not sure how the rock got there. Maybe someone threw it out there. But on another day, I can go back here and see if this rock has sunk down into the ice a little bit. So again, another more of a documenting photo for future purposes if needed. So I'll crop it in further, just like I did with the last photo. Move up some shadows on it. Maybe even a little bit more exposure. And that's that one. So I have these two photos here. And I chose a second photo because I kind of have the horizon in the middle here. And so I took another photo directly afterwards. I wanted to show more of the ice in front of this building here that's in downtown Lock Haven. And the ice does come out pretty bright on a sunny day. So I'm going to move some highlights down. And I'm going to put some shadows up to give more of a brightness to the side of the river here in the buildings, because this was facing north and the sun wasn't directly hitting these buildings here. And I'm going to adjust the crop a little bit to kind of position things into the thirds. And what I mean by the thirds are these guidelines here that I have set onto my crop. These are all third guidelines. So sometimes what you want to do is put things on the thirds. So if I went down here to the riverbank to put that on a third, I'd be losing the building. So maybe I will put the upper part of the walkway onto a third. And maybe I will put this bridge coming into this third here. So that looks pretty good. And then also you have the ice taking up half of the photo then, and this water line down here is kind of on the third. So that's good for my crop. Another common thing I do with almost every photo is adjust the masking on the sharpness. So what I will do is hold down the Alt key, and move the masking to so the sky kind of goes black. I don't need to have any sharpness on the sky. And you'll also notice some of the water down below starts to turn to a solid black. And what you're looking for is just to kind of highlight the very details of the photo. And so that way your sharpness only applies to the details that you want them to apply to, and not like the sky. You don't want the sky to be any sharper because it's all just one solid color anyway. And also if you wanted to adjust your noise reduction, that it would apply to the areas that you didn't select for the sharpening, and your sharpening's not going to really interfere with it. And you can see up here on the levels that the highlights and the whites are really taking up a lot of this photo. So you could bring the overall exposure down a bit. So maybe I'll come down a little bit, and I think what I'm going to do with this photo is create a mask and use a linear gradient to kind of go over the ice part of this photo and kind of highlight just the river. And I'll do a gradient just so it's not a sharp contrast into the ice. And now over here you can see I got mask 1, and I will take the exposure down on the foreground ice here. And maybe even add some contrast into it to kind of give a contrast between the darker shades of the shadows of the ice. And that looks pretty good. And again, this isn't, like a real great landscape photography type creative photo. Again, what I do a lot of times is just document type photos, documenting the ice here, of course, but the building and the kind of the stage layout here on the side of the river kind of adds to the photo and the creative of it. And again, this is Lock Haven in Lock Haven in Pennsylvania, and it's a popular river town. They have Lock Haven University here, and they also do like stages or bands here on the riverside sometimes, and boats are welcome to join in as well. And that's kind of what these stairs are here, is kind of a stage for the river, which is kind of cool. And then up top is a river walk that goes along the town. And sometimes I like to see what the vignetting would look like on the photo. So I kind of go through these, and not too impressive. It doesn't really... The reason you would add this is to kind of give more focus to the center part of your subject. But in a landscape like this, I think it's okay without the vignetting. And we can do a before and after contrast on this one, just to kind of give you an idea. You can see we lightened up a lot of the shadows on the north side of the building and along the river's edge. And I am seeing that you may not be able to see my mouse pointer, which that's kind of unfortunate. Again, this is my first time really going live on YouTube, so that'll be something I have to look into to see if I can display my mouse pointer while I'm showing these editing. And on to the next photo. Just a cool piece of ice that was in the river. I really like the curvature to this piece of ice here, and it shows kind of the depth to the ice. A lot of this ice just is kind of getting bunched up here. It's kind of forcing its way way downstream, so it kind of bunches up, and kind of like the way mountains on the landscape are formed as well. They kind of get pressured together, and they have nowhere to go but to kind of pop out of the river a little bit. So that's kind of what I'm showing here. And there's some clear ice, and it looks like there's even some snow that fell after this ice was formed. And I'm gonna leave the riverbank at the top of this photo. Just kind of gives a little bit more detail into it and shows that I'm kind of shooting across the river from where I'm standing. I have the other bank inside. You could bring the crop down to give more of a texture look to this photo. And I think with the crop open like this, it kind of gives it more of a landscape feel to it. And so this one I'm basically going to leave alone. I'm just going to adjust the highlights and the shadows. And sometimes when I raise up these shadows, I will tend to put the white level in between the black and the shadows. It just seems like it always wants to fit there really nice, for my style anyway. So if I were to put the blacks way down here, I might put the white level kind of in between them so they create a straight line between all three of these levels. So with the blacks there, I'll just slightly bump up the white level. And I'm going to adjust the masking for the sharpness. Hold down the Alt key and move the slider up to just cover the details. And not sure why that was so slow there. And if you're watching this live or in the future, make sure you're commenting and asking questions. The questions always kind of help me gauge what the public likes to see as far as editing, what your experience level is, and offers me some ways to offer you help in any questions you have. But with my first live stream, I do see I have no viewers, so that's kind of what I expected. So and I'm not sure if this will save to YouTube or not, and I'm not sure if I want them to save or not, at least until I get more regular viewers on the live stream. I do live streams on my Facebook. I started doing them in December, and I go over more videos and kind of do like virtual tours with my Facebook live stream. And it's not something I wanted to do with YouTube right away. I feel like Facebook is more local to my area, and with I think I have about 3,000 or 4,000 followers on Facebook. So I know that Facebook Live will get my content out to people in my area, which is something that I more enjoy, sharing content from my area with the people of that area. And when it comes to YouTube, I know that it's more national or worldwide, so I figure I'll start doing maybe like tutorials or something on YouTube Live, especially while I'm doing them, because I'm going to be editing these photos anyway. And this gives the public the chance to kind of see me edit over the photos that I'm going to be posting live. So if you're from my Facebook, welcome. You can kind of see the process that I go through to edit my photos before I put them on Facebook. And you'll see even more photos on my live stream. So you'll see I have 60 photos on this day, and I'll probably post maybe 10 or 12 of these. I'm not going to post every photo. A lot of these photos, like these two here, are kind of the same photo, just a slightly different angle. So I won't even be editing this one. This one will just sit on my folder and never be touched. And I'll probably post that one because I really do like the buildings in the background. And of course, I want to document the ice and show the public the ice, because this year we've had a quite large amount of ice in the area compared to previous years. So I'm going to kind of go through these photos and quiet my explanations up a little bit, since there's really no one here and I don't expect anybody to get in. But if I do see someone jump in, make sure you leave a comment, let me know you're here. Feel free to ask some questions. I framed this photo specifically for that boulder field that's in the top of the photo there. That's Castania boulder field across the river from Lock Haven. Well, I guess not across the river. I guess it is, looking from this point anyway, it's on the same side as Lock Haven. But that's on the northern facing side of Bald Eagle Mountains. And I got some photos from up on that boulder field that are really nice. It's a really nice lookout up on that boulder field. And I'm not sure how I should crop this. Kind of in a bad angle. I should have did a vertical photo, and I think I did. Yeah, the next one's a vertical photo, so this one I can look at for horizontal purposes. Purposes. You can tell I don't talk on the live stream that much. Something I just started doing a month ago. And before, I would have to add voice to some of my videos, and it takes me forever to get it right. I've been doing public speaking and doing public presentations for about 5 years. More than that, about 7 years now. And at first I was not really nervous, but could never get my words to come out. You know, it's not like talking to someone, you know, that's next to you or talking to your friends. You always want to make sure your words are perfect. And I think that's what my problem is a lot of times. I always want to get the perfect words. So I'm always thinking about what I'm saying and also trying to say it at the same time. So, but I've come a long way in the last 7 years. And of course, I'm drinking my coffee as I edit my photos, especially in the morning all the way through the afternoon. If I'm editing photos, I usually have a cup of coffee with me. That's what you're hearing, this jingle. And when it comes to live streaming, it's always a little different because you're not really talking to anybody. You're just talking to yourself in front of a computer. So it becomes a little awkward for me sometimes. And I really like the way that stick comes in, so I want to keep that in the photo. Maybe I'll put it way down at the edge. Or if nothing else, you know, this isn't a great photo, so I'll just leave it fully cropped. And the shadows actually came out pretty good on this one. I think it's because I am a little bit past noon here. So the sun is more, yeah, you can see it there. It's kind of at the, no, that might not even be a shadow. That might, yeah, no, that's got to be a shadow there. And of course, no one can see my pointer, so they don't know what I'm looking at. And I'm using OBS Studio. Maybe there's a better streaming software I can use, but I'm not in a position to pay for any kind of streaming software yet. So I'm going to leave this one as it is. It doesn't look too bad. And I'm kind of more interested in this photo for a creative shot. And again, I'm going to kind of leave that bank stick in the photo that reaches out from the bank into the river. It kind of shows that I'm on the river edge here. And I want to make sure that the boulder field is kind of in that upper third of a box. I can't really put the river level at a third because it puts that boulder field way up at the top. So I'm just going to break the rule of thirds here a little bit and kind of center that boulder field into this upper middle third of a block. And again, these are just documenting photos, so I'm not really doing anything creative with these other than just showing some of the background landscape versus the ice on the river, and it kind of gives you an idea of where I've taken this photo to. Anytime you incorporate features that, especially popular features like that boulder field there in the back, a lot of people are familiar with that boulder field. And I do kind of want to make that shadows on the mountain a little bit brighter. And I'll turn down some of the highlights to kind of lower the exposure on the ice in the foreground. And I know this kind of defeats the purpose, but I do give a little bit of contrast, even though I kind of did less contrast with the highlights and shadows. And just as an example, you can see I did add some contrast, but you can see the shadows are a lot brighter now. So I kind of took away contrast with the lowering the highlights and increasing the shadows. And then I brought some of the contrast back with simply the contrast slider. And this would probably be a good idea to show an example of how I use the linear gradients sometimes. And sometimes I like to pull these gradients across the whole foreground when I'm doing river shots like this. And sometimes I'll make as it gets closer to the viewer, I'll make it a little darker. And you can do that by simply lowering the exposure. And that kind of gives more of a depth to the photo when you do this. And I like that, so I'm just going to keep that like it is. And I probably could have moved the gradient a little bit to the edge a little bit more. Actually, I thought I could move that bar. I guess I can't. So I can move it down like this. And so that's it for that photo. Very simple edits. I don't go crazy on my editing. I like to make them look really natural and just kind of pop out little details to expose the area, add some depth to the photo, brighten some of the darker areas, especially in the wintertime. Like I said, this mountain faces north, so it doesn't get that full sunlight until past noon when the sun starts to go down or I guess up the river valley from Lock Haven in this instance. And here's a close-up shot of that ice photo from the previous one where I took a more of a zoomed out shot. This one is at 79 millimeters and this one's probably 250. So my lens goes into 250. And I'll just do a simple edit here. Maybe I will somewhat center that piece of ice that I was going for. And this is going to be kind of a texture example. There's not really much landscape or depth to this photo. Of course, I'll set the masking for the sharpness. And I can bring the exposure down. You can see them levels are very bright on this photo. It's an all white photo, so these ones are very particular on kind of spreading that brightness out. So I can pull the darkers down a little bit. Some highlights. Maybe if I pull the contrast down, let's see what that looks. I usually don't mess with contrast that much. Yeah, I'm going to keep it at 0. And you could pull shadows down in this. Kind of gives it more depth and more of a feel for the brightness in this photo. And I kind of like that with the shadows down. I think I'll keep that. Maybe not as drastic. And I like that photo where it's at. On to the next, photo number 10. Just another documenting photo of the ice. I don't really think there's much reason for me to edit this for a recent or a new post or anything. I think these last 2 photos that I got of the ice kind of do it justice. And I'm not going to be posting every photo that I've took yesterday anyway. I'm probably going to pick out about 12 of the better photos to post. Same thing with this one. Just a documenting photo for my own purposes. So these ones here are from a different location. The location I was before was at the right side of the bridge up above the dam here that goes across the photo. And so this was my first landscape photo from this location. I wish I had a slightly wider lens here. So what I did was take 3 photos across the river with my... Yeah, actually I could have changed lens, but it was cold here and I didn't really want to mess with changing the lens out. So using the 100mm lens, I just took 3 photos across the river and then used Lightroom to stitch them together. You go up to photo, photo merge, and then panorama. So you would select the 3 photos that you want to merge. You can either select each one using the control key, or you select the first one and then hold shift and go to your last one. And then go up to photo, photo merge, panorama. And there's some different settings in here to go with. I think I usually use cylindrical on a lot of them, but you can go through them. It didn't really change that much. Perspective's a little bit different as well. Boundary warp changes some of your settings, and I usually use boundary warp a lot, but I don't know if it was a recent Lightroom update, but they tend to get really drastic. I mean, you can see the curves on the water here. So recently I've been putting the boundary warp at 0. And I think when I do photo merges with interior shots, so I do a lot of real estate photography, and I have to merge some of my interior shots just because they really don't make a lens wide enough sometimes to get a full interior shot of a really small, like, bathroom or closet space. And so maybe there I would put my boundary warp up. But I'm going to cancel this because I've already warped or merged that photo into this one. And it looks like I used a crop already. And that is really different. Why is it doing... I'm not sure why there's a photo in the background there. Why is it doing that to me? Oh, that's interesting. I didn't. Huh. It's weird that there's. Maybe it must just not have read that third part of the photo up in the sky. But this left side bank just doesn't look right to me, so I'm going to get that mostly out of the crop. I'm also going to unlock the crop, the aspect ratio anyway, and get as much height as I can since this is a really wide shot. And I do need to take it back over to that side. I should have grabbed another photo further to the right. I'm not sure why I didn't. So when you do the photo merge, there's the option to do the auto settings on it, and that's where all these settings changed on me. So a lot of times I'll forget to undo that, or sometimes I'll just let it go just to see what I guess the AI would decide is the best settings for me, which are never the same as mine. So again, my favorite settings, the highlights and shadows right off the bat. And this is typical of a lot of my photo edits, are bringing the highlights down and bringing the shadows up. And I really feel that that gives a lot of exposure to the entire photo. And then if needed, if it feels like it's too flat, you can increase the contrast. So set my sharpness masking again. I do this for almost every landscape photo. I feel like it gives less distortion when you go to compress the image to upload it to Facebook as well. You won't see like distortion around a lot of edges, which was a huge problem for me 5-10 years ago uploading photos to Facebook. And this is a huge photo, so this one's I'm going to say my photos are 24 megabytes in size, megapixels or whatever it is. And so this is built up of 3 photos, so it's huge as far as the megapixels go. And then when you upload it to Facebook, it feels like they're just distorted, and there's pixelization. I mean, it looks worse than a cell phone photo sometimes. And so I started doing that sharpness masking, and I think that helped out a little, but also the settings in which you save your photos. So I reduce, when I'm uploading to Facebook, I reduce my photos in size to about 2048 pixels on the long edge. And I think that when I have Lightroom reduce the image, Facebook doesn't need to reduce the image size. And I think Lightroom does a lot better job, obviously, than Facebook when it comes to reducing the image to make it available for online use. So quick before and after to see the differences. I think the after shot kind of gives more depth to the photo, a little bit more contrast, and you can see some of the details on the ice a little bit better. I probably could have did a better job over on this side. But again, this isn't an outstanding creative landscape type photo, so I'm not doing too much to them. I want them to look as natural as possible. But this would make, like a nice wide framed shot for a business that's in downtown Lock Haven or so that can recognize the area and appreciate the amount of ice we've been getting this year. So that one's actually pretty nice, and I'm going to give that a rating now of 2. I should have been rating my previous photos. Anytime I edit a photo, it automatically, I give it a 1-star rating. And in Lightroom, you can do that simply by selecting the photo and pushing either 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And so if I like a photo, I'll give it a rating of 2. And these other photos that I've edited, I will give an automatic rating of 1, just so I can recall the photos that I've edited. There's other ways to recall them as well, but I feel like it's just easier giving everything an automatic rating of 1 if I edited it. Give that one a 1. This next photo, again, just a documenting photo. I wanted to show that the ice does start to kind of freeze over the river again after this bridge. So in this shot, you can see the ice was taking up the whole river all the way down to the dam. A little bit open on the right side of the dam, but the ice came right down to the dam on the left side. And then from the dam down, it is not frozen over. And that's mostly from the dam kind of breaking up the flow of water, and it would break up the ice. If it went over the dam, the ice would get broken up, and then it's not formed again until below this bridge. So I'll use this for comparison photos to previous years and also future years, so I can kind of compare to maybe there will be no ice next year, or maybe the ice will be all the way up to the bridge piers next year. So that's a lot of the reasons that I take a lot of photos out in the field, not necessarily for creative landscape purposes, but for documents, comparisons, to look back in the future. And I'm not even going to edit this photo. I may come back to it, but I don't feel any importance in showing where the ice is here at this particular time. So the next location is Fishing Creek in this town of Mill Hall. And I took some photos as soon as I got to the park, because once I stepped out of my vehicle, a lot of the ducks and pekin, which are some of them white ones there, some geese, they tend to start moving away from me as soon as I get out of the vehicle. So I want to make sure I get some quick shots off, just in case I can't get closer to these birds once I get into position for more of a creative shot. So these are pekin here, and I noticed this right when I was taking the photo. The exposure was really slow, and you can see it's blurry, and my shutter is really slow, and the exposure is kind of overexposed as well. And I will take some shots, as soon as I step out of a vehicle, or as soon as I step somewhere, start taking shots and start to adjust your exposure, your settings, your whatever you need to adjust afterwards after previewing the photo. And then again, other times I'll step out and take my time and make sure I got the settings right before I start taking photos. This one here, you can see, and I've already edited this one because I thought it was cool, that this is a pekin here on the left. On the right is more of a 50-50 cross between a pekin and a mallard duck. And then this bird here in the middle is a cross between them two. So the bird in the middle is probably going to be about 75% pekin and 25% mallard. And I just thought this was awesome to get all 3 of these ducks in the same photo, and you kind of show the contrast between all 3 of these ducks, and how the ducks kind of look like both their parents. So I believe the one on the right is going to be the male. The completely white pekin on the left is going to be the mother. And the one in the middle is their offspring. I did kind of miss the shutter speed again on this. My shutter speed is 1/125, so a little bit better. I did adjust the shutter, but you can see it still was a little bit slow. And a good rule of thumb, so here I'm shooting at 250 millimeter. Ideally, I would want my shutter speed to be 1/250, 1/250. Here I'm a little bit slower, so I'm 1/125. It's a good rule of thumb at whatever lens zoom you're using to match that at least with your shutter. So I would want 1/250 on my shutter or quicker. And that's a good general rule of thumb to keep your photos with the right sharpness. And these ducks are moving upriver to get away from me, but they're not moving fast. It's not like they're flying or anything like that. But I should have had a much faster shutter speed here. So I edited this photo yesterday to make a quick post about these birds. And here's the before and after. Again, not really much change here. I like to keep my photos natural, and I think the main piece that I edited was the noise reduction. And I can't really hide that from you because I did the AI noise reduction, which if you have an updated version of Lightroom, this new denoise button here works absolutely amazing. It takes a little bit of time, it takes a lot of PC power, but it does an awesome job. Okay, so here I can look at the non-noised photo. So here it is before I denoised it. I believe, yeah, should be, yeah. And then here's the enhanced version. So maybe I can zoom in to show you the details. And really, this is going to be a bad example for the denoise option. So if you really look close, you can see some pixelization on the shadows of this peak in here on the left, and some pixelization on the water. When I go over to the enhanced version, yeah, this is a really bad example for denoise, so just forget about what I was saying there. On to the next photo. Zoom back out. The offspring pekin mallard hybrid was getting ready to flex his wings a little bit. And for this one, I'm going to see if I can crop it down to get a solo of just that bird there. Probably not going to be able to get a solo of them unless I really took it in close. Let's see what that looks like. It's actually not that bad. What was my shutter here? My shutter was 1/160th, so still a slow shutter, but it ended up getting that detail pretty good on this one. Got lucky on keeping my hand still for that shot. And the photos I'm posting with these edits are going to be on Facebook, so I'm not too worried about having high quality photos on Facebook. Now, if this was like a magazine shot or something that I wanted to print out for a framed wall art, I probably wouldn't crop it in that far, especially for my website, which has Fine Art America as my third-party drop ship for framed artwork. They actually have a minimum on your megapixels, and this probably wouldn't meet the minimum standards for that. But for Facebook, cropping in that far is just fine. And not much I can do with the thirds here. Normally, I would kind of put the thirds and make the duck kind of looking towards the middle of the photo. But in this case, I think I'm just going to keep him centered. Maybe I can put his eyeball on the right third of the photo. Maybe I'll put his eyeball right in the direct third of each way. First thing I do, again, is usually adjust the highlights. A lot of my adjustments go right down the order of which Lightroom it lists them here on the right hand side. So the highlights, first the exposure or contrast, which I think is fine in this photo. And then the highlights I think are a little bit too bright. So I'm going to move the highlights probably way down on this. And if you feel like your highlights need to go further down, that would mean your exposure is a little bit off. So I'll put the exposure down a little bit and then come back to the highlights. And that looks a lot better there. Now I don't need to go to the extreme with the highlights. And the shadows are kind of bright in this one too, so maybe I can lower some shadows and give some more depth to the image. Maybe even the blacks as well, kind of give much more contrast. And I'll look at the before and after. Yeah, I like the image with more contrast. I like that. Maybe I'll go back up a little bit more with the shadows. Just keep the blacks lower. The presence, I don't usually mess too much with this unless I'm doing an extreme creative shot. Down to the sharpness masking. Kind of find that zone that gives me the most detail when I'm holding Alt. And that's going to be it for this photo. I don't use lens correction or transform when I'm doing wildlife photos. I feel like it's just not needed. Again, if you did the profile correction, you know, it doesn't change much. But if I was doing like an architectural landscape with a lot of straight lines in the photos, that's where profile corrections would be more important, and also the automatic transform or manual transform. Sometimes the transform is just not going to work at all for a landscape photo that doesn't have like straight lines or anything that can noticeably be put upright. And a lot of times it's going to make your photo even more crooked or less upright than normal. So that's it for that one. Before and after quick. And then a lot of these next photos are just grabbing some mallards here, nothing creative, just documenting purposes and getting a look at the birds. I always like getting as many birds as possible. You never know if you're going to find one that could possibly be tagged, or the mallards aren't usually tagged, but there's also geese here, and I'm going to have a look at the geese here and see if I can see any tags around the ankles. And if you report the tag numbers, they do offer you a certificate for reporting the number. And if you're a hunter and you get one of them tags, I think they give you something more than a certificate. Maybe it's like some kind of a medal or. And the geese, Canadian geese, are somewhat invasive in our country, so they do like to monitor their migration patterns and all that. And you can see this, I'll back up one photo here. This one, the shutter speed is way off. So I'm at 1/60th of a second, way too slow for a wildlife photo when I'm using a 250mm lens. And probably all of these are not really going to be usable. Would be fine for Facebook, but there would be no use for these photos other than documenting purposes. I feel like I'm saying purposes wrong. Purposes? Purposes? And I think I do want to grab at least one mallard photo, so maybe I'll use this one. I'll kind of crop out the details that I missed. and kind of show just a couple mallards. That way at least I have some mallards, and if I choose to post all these photos in like one group, people will know that I saw mallards at this location. Just do a quick detail, raise the shadows a little, the highlights down a little, get that glare off of the sun facing pieces of these mallards. And good enough for that photo. So on to photo number 31, which is not a very good photo at all. But I was trying to set up a foreground with these geese that are much closer to me on the right, up on the bank, and do a comparison shot with the geese that will be out of focus on the left in the background. And I believe I should capture that in one of these photos. Everything's okay, there it is. But you can see everything's kind of out of focus on this one and the previous photos. And then here I got the focus a little bit better on the geese that's on the right, the goose. And I see I do got one more photo, so I'm going to probably pick the better of these two photos. Okay, so that's just a different one. So I did the focus on the background. So I'll probably use both of these, but we'll start with the foreground focus on this one. Probably start with the crop because I feel like it's not really cropped correctly. There's some distractions on the outer edge. I want to get that distraction out, kind of that odd shaped pole. And then we have the bridge, which is going to be on the top of the photo. So I'm going to see what it looks like if I crop that bridge out. Maybe go something like this. I like how that geese that's in focus is looking towards the center of the photo. It's always good to have your subjects, whatever action they maybe have. In this case, the only real action that geese is doing is just posing and looking. But at least he's looking towards the center of the photo and not flipped around facing the right and kind of facing the edge of the photo. It never looks good compared to when they're facing the center of the photo. So I like it cropping out the bridge. I like that, kind of gets that structure and distraction out of the crop. Now I'll move on to the tone. I feel like the overall exposure is pretty good. I think the shadows are a little dark, so maybe I'll try to buff up the shadows. And maybe I do need to give it some overall more exposure. It's kind of flattening the image out, so I'm going to add some contrast, give it some more light depth to it. And so here's where the masking is a little bit more important, because most of the photo is out of focus on purpose. So when I do the masking, I'm going to see if I can get most of that photo out of the masking, because I don't want to sharpen anything that's not in focus. And it didn't work as well as I thought. And so maybe here I can do a special masking, and I will see how AI does when I tell it to automatically select the subject. And I'm going to see what it selects here. Hopefully it gets the bottom right portion of the photo in focus. And it's just going to get the geese there. And that might be all right. That might be all right. So I'm going to invert this to go to everything besides the subject. Invert here. And so now it's going to select everything except for what's in focus, that goose on the right side. And so on this layer, see, I can, what am I looking for here? Sharpness down here in the detail. So I'm going to lower the sharpness on everything that's not in the focus. And so here I'll do a before and after. Okay, I gotta hold it. So there's with the sharpness at the normal level, and here is the sharpness at the adjusted level. And maybe it's a little bit too much. Maybe I'll go halfway. So before detail, and it's not really changing much there. I guess I should go a little bit more on the sharpness. And you can also reduce the noise on the background as well. And that's not going to interfere with the goose that's in focus, because we're only selecting everything that's red on this photo. And AI chose that for me, which is really nice. It saves a lot of time trying to cut out that goose. AI in this case did a good job at knowing what my subject was in this photo. And I really like the shot. It's pretty creative. It's a nice landscape. It's got wildlife in it. So I want to do one more mask on this, and I'm going to choose a linear gradient, and I want to pull some of that light towards this goose. So you can see the direction that I'm choosing for this gradient. I'm kind of coming from the bottom left a little bit and pointing it towards the Canadian goose on the right. And what I'm going to do here is make the left side of that photo just a little bit darker. So that tends to kind of pull your eye to the right of the photo. Kind of gives more focus towards the right of the photo, which is now a lot brighter. Close the mask. And I think that's going to be good for this photo. I'll show you before and after. And since the next photo I'm going to be editing is very similar to this photo, what I can do is copy the settings and paste them into over here. But what I want to make sure I don't do is copy the masks, because the masks are going to be different. So I don't have the masking checked, which is what I want. So I'm not going to check that. I'm going to leave it unchecked. And we're just basically going to copy the tone, the detail, and I don't even need the lens correction. I can turn that off. So we'll copy the tones, paste them into this image. And I think I'm going to do the same thing with cropping out that bridge. I feel like that's a real big distraction. And I'm going to move that crop over to include more of that foreground, which is out of focus on purpose. And here I think I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to do a mask, but the same thing, but kind of in an opposite form. So I'm going to do a mask. I'm going to see how AI does on finding my subject, which should be most of the photo. Okay, it's going to pick the same thing, which is really not my subject. So that's not going to work for me. I haven't messed too much with these new mask options, and I don't think I'm going to right now. I just need to delete this mask. Delete all masks, that'll be fine. Wonder what it does if I choose the background mask. Everything but the geese. Okay. Not what I'm looking for either. So I'm going to do a linear gradient, and this time I'm going to do the opposite direction. I'm going to come from the bottom right and point the gradient towards the top here. And this was kind of what I was trying to get at with the AI selecting my foreground image, which didn't really work that well. And I'm going to make the foreground a little bit darker to kind of bring your eyes to the background, which is more of what's in focus. And I'm also going to turn down the sharpness on that foreground a little bit more because it's not supposed to be in focus. So kind of give a little bit additional blurriness to the foreground there. And I'm also going to reduce a lot of noise because I'm seeing a lot of noise on them shadows in the foreground. And the noise also kind of adds to the blurriness as well, so we're winning in both directions here. So I like that photo. Do a before and after. I like it. I'm going to paste this link into my Facebook page in case anybody wants to hop over, and if they're bored they can watch me edit some ice photos from the West Branch Susquehanna River and other streams in Clinton County. Link posted. We'll see if anyone hops in. I need to get more subscribers on Facebook. I haven't really, or I mean YouTube, I haven't really used YouTube that much. And before I get into too much YouTube, I would like to have more people from the area on YouTube. And again, my favorite way to express my photos is with people that are local to the area that I take these photos in. So right now I'm kind of doing some details on the ice from Fishing Creek. Here's the before and after. I really want to make that ice in the background really dark for this one to give it a lot of contrast, kind of give more of a texture feel to it. The very creative type shots that I'm editing now, so we'll see more extreme on the tones. And let's see what AI thinks is my subject in this photo. It should pick out that really bright ice there in the front. And so I'm going to invert that to choose everything except for my subject, which is outlined in red there. And then I want to take that stuff kind of out of focus, so I'll lower the sharpness on it, and maybe all the way down even too. We can go all the way down on the sharpness, and I'll put the noise very high. The noise, more noise reduction kind of makes your image more blurry too. And again, we're only applying this to what's highlighted in red there, which is the inverted subject. Kind of looks like a bird's head almost. Okay, got the nostril here towards the right side of the piece of ice. Kind of looks like a beak of a mallard. And maybe I'll kind of straighten that up a little bit to give it more of a right triangle look. Go down, crop it down in a little bit. Bring more of the subject into the photo. Go back to before and after. So on this one, I'm okay going pretty extreme on the editing because this is more of a creative shot and not a realistic landscape or a realistic wildlife. And in my wildlife and landscapes photos, I tend not to edit them as much. I want them to look as natural as possible. So more detail of trapped air in the ice here. Not sure if I'll be able to do anything with this, so I'm just going to kind of move the levels around and see if anything pops out. Maybe I can try a black and white with this one. So if you want to do a simple black and white photo, you just remove all the saturation. Simple as that. There's a lot of other ways to do it, but if you just want to quick eyeball your photo in a black and white form, you just move your saturation all the way to 0 or -100 in Lightroom's terms. And really, you can edit a lot of your photos in black and white first. It gives your eyeballs more trained on the details in that case. And then after you're done editing your tones, you can move your saturation back to the middle. In this case, there's a lot of blue there, so I would want to adjust my temperature with less blue in it. I use automatic white balance when I shoot, but I shoot in RAW, so I can choose my white balance later. So I like black and white on this one. So here I might use the texture slider to kind of give more detail, and it's kind of like a sharpness adjustment, but it kind of highlights the textures in your photo, and this is pretty much a completely texture shot here. This is what this photo will be described as ice texture. And you can mess with the clarity too. The clarity, I'll kind of move around and see if anything fits for the creative shot I'm trying to perform. And I'm just going to keep the clarity at 0 where it was. Of course, do my masking, my sharpness masking. And make sure it's just highlighting the lines of the air bubbles. And I think that's good for this shot. And I didn't crop it in at all. I'm okay with the crop that it's at. Do a before and after. So there's what it was before, and going to black and white on the right is what I'm going to choose for this photo. Next photo is a feather I found on the ice here. Not really sure what I had in mind here, but I wanted to get a feather on the ice and see what I can do with it afterwards. So I'm going to choose black and white for this one as well. Kind of take the distraction of colors out of the photo. I think I need less exposure. The black and white feather photos are a popular texture that I like to try and come up with. You really get to see the lines and the grain of the details of the feather against a black backdrop. Makes that feather really stand out. In this case, we got snow in the photo too. Not too happy with the snow texture here, but that's all right. Ooh, and actually, I think that is a footprint here on the right. Too bad I didn't notice that during the shot. I could have included that. Yeah, not really going to get that footprint in the crop. Before and after, I'm okay with it. I'm not really impressed with this shot, so I'm not going to do too much to it as far as a creative edit to it. Here's a rock poking up from the surface of the creek up through the ice. And the rocks absorb a little bit more heat, so the ice tends to melt around the rock when the sun's out, and sometimes can create a good example of a possible creative shot. There's always so much you can do with ice. It creates so many special textures to it, and didn't really have much as far as my creative eye yesterday, so I just took a couple before I left Fishing Creek here. I'm just going to copy what I did here and paste it into this to save a little time. See what that looks like. I feel like that black and white shot kind of takes away from the rock being in the photo. You don't really realize that's a rock now. It still looks creative. Still a creative texture, I guess. Maybe I'll just add the saturation back into it. Ooh, that's way off. I think I'll leave the color in this shot. Maybe just crop it down a little closer to that rock. You can actually kind of see some of the algae and mud on the rock there. See just a kiss of green highlights on that rock, so I'll leave the color in this shot. I'll probably pull up them blacks, that's a little bit dark. Go with something like that. Looks good. Not a great photo, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. Before and after looks good. So on to Bald Eagle State Park. This is Sayres Lake. We went down here to observe some ice fishermen yesterday. Quite a bit of ice fishermen out yesterday, and usually they're like more condensed in this area. But with all the ice we had, there's more opportunities to really spread out among the ice fishermen. I came here last year and we only had ice for a few days that was acceptable to walk on. And they were really bunched in here. There was if I would have taken this view last year, there probably would have been about 15 to 20 ice huts all in one little framed shot. So on the crop, I'm just going to straighten it out a little bit. And if you go to turn your photo, you can kind of eyeball the horizon with the water against the land in the back. And I'm just going to straighten that out. Looks like I was a little bit crooked when I took the photo. And maybe I will crop that guy that I cut off on the left there out of the photo. And maybe I will crop the land out from the right of the photo. I think that looks a little better. Always trying to create as little distractions as possible. I do like the bottom of the photo to be in, kind of give more of a foreground. I'm going to put the top tree line at the very edge so I can get more of the bottom into the foreground. The ice is pretty bright. I'm kind of shooting through the shadows here, so I'm going to turn down the highlights to give some more detail on that very bright spot on the ice. And maybe some more light to the shadows. Let's see what the texture adjustments look like. I think I do like a little bit of added texture to this one. Of course, I'll adjust my sharpness masking. So I'm going to copy and paste a bunch of the settings from the rest of the photos since they're very similar. I'm going to close in with the crop, and I'm going to put the fisherman on the lower third and on the left third, so the lower left third. And maybe I will put the bottom of their bucket on the lower third. And I'll crop in a little bit more so I can get their fishing hut on the upper right third of the photo. Kind of balance everything into the middle, but still using the thirds. Before and after. I guess I could keep them shadows a little bit darker. Kind of a drastic increase in shadows on this one. Maybe I'll go down a little bit with the exposure. And in this case, the shadows are on the foreground. I'm just going to crop that little light bar out of it quick. With the shadows in the foreground like this, I'm okay if they are a little bit darker. They're not really kind of hiding any details or anything. Maybe I'll try a little bit more contrast too. And it feels like my temperature is a little bit cool. So I'll try and correct the white balance a little bit. Back to before and after. I like it. Again, not much drastic editing to my landscape photos and my realistic photos. I tend not to edit them too drastically. I like that natural feel to them. I'm not sure if this guy was sleeping or not, but it was definitely a windy day. The temperature wasn't bad. It was 32, maybe a little bit colder on the ice, but the wind was really blowing yesterday. And maybe I'll get him into a third, see what he looks like over to the third. Maybe get that distraction of the light out of the crop. And I'm going to copy the settings from the last photo, the tone and the detail anyway. Paste them into this photo. A little bit bright, so I'll drop the exposure. And I like this one. It's got a little bit of solitude to the subject. So with this photo, the first thing that catches my eye is the red. And I'll kind of use this as an example of a color pop. So a lot of creators like to pop certain colors out of a photo, especially when it comes to red items, like a red apple in front of a black and white background always pops out really nice. So in this case, man, I just can't center that. I gotta get that more centered. Well, I wish I would have took a few of these because I kind of like them reds now that I'm looking at them. So in this case, since it's only the red I want to pop out, I'm going to open up, figure out which one it is here, color mixer, yeah. So I'm going to open up color mixer in Lightroom, and I'm going to choose the saturation. I'm going to leave red where it is, and I'm going to move all the other ones down to the lowest measurement of -100 in Lightroom. And that's how simple it can be to pop just one color in your photo. So I'm going to paste over the settings from before. And it's that simple to do a color pop photo. I just really don't like that crop. Wish I would have took more of this example. Probably pull that side over a little more. Maybe I'll pull them to the bottom third of the photo, bring more of that tree line into the upper third. So I like that one. I'll do a before and after example. On to the next photo. I'm going to take out the road on this photo, give it more solitude. Maybe go way in on that ice hut there so you can get the detail of the ice hut and the ice auger next to it. See how that looks. Paste in my ice settings, or bring the exposure down a little bit. Increase the temperature. And in this case would be a good example to experiment with the vignetting to kind of draw more light towards the center of the photo by darkening the outer edges. And I'm going to choose medium vignetting. Before and after. Maybe that's a little bit too much temperature. Give it some more blue, give it more of a winter feel to it. And I like that. Next photo. Got a solo fisherman above Old Route 220, which kind of dives into the lake and goes under the lake now. Next photo from Sayers Lake, another solo fisherman. I'm going to paste in the settings from the last shot. And I'm going to crop him in so he's facing the center of the photo. And there's also some sled tracks in this one too, so that's kind of cool. We're just going to see what it looks like in black and white. I haven't done any black and white fishermen yet. That could be an option to go black and white for this shot. There's not too much color involved except for his jacket. So maybe we'll just go black and white with this shot, kind of give it a creative look to it. Next photo is the dam at Sayers Lake with the Bald Eagle Mountains in the background and some fish habitats on the bank to the left. And this one's more of a documenting photo, so I can compare it to other years and just to have it, nothing creative here. Maybe I'll put the water line right in the middle of the photo. That seems alright. Paste in the previous settings. Put the temperature back to a little cooler and lower the exposure. I see a lot of graininess in the sky, so I'm going to do the mask and I'm going to tell AI to select the sky, which does an awesome job in the updated version of Lightroom. Just in a few seconds it highlighted the sky there. So with the sky highlighted, I will take the noise, and sometimes you can move the noise all the way up. It doesn't affect the rest of the photo. And the noise looks alright with the slider all the way to 100. Get all that graininess out of the photo. And I was using the ISO of 400 here, so there is going to be a little bit of grain when it comes to solid surfaces like the blue sky. Before and after. Again, I don't edit too much on my basic photos of landscapes, especially for documenting purposes. I like to keep them as natural as possible and just kind of highlight small little details. Next shot is fish habitat along the banks of Sayers Lake, which they have a lot of these placed in the river, the lake, all the way around the lake. They have these habitats here that you can see that are man-made, and they place them along the lake to encourage fish habitat, fish breeding, and kind of house a lot more fish in the lake. So there's kind of a lot going on in this photo. I'm going to keep it that way. You got the fish habitat on the left, you got old Route 220 in the middle that kind of dives through the photo. Then there's these cool tree roots that are normally underwater, but they're exposed now because they draw down the lake a little bit for the winter. And then after ice season, they will draw the lake down some more in preparations of the rainy season come spring. That allows the lake to fill up with water when it rains heavy and when we get a lot of rain, to not overwhelm creeks and rivers downstream from the lake. Paste in my previous settings and go from there, lower the exposure again. And maybe we'll leave a lot of contrast in this photo to give it a more of a creative sunset kind of look to it. This was later in the day, but it wasn't quite sunset yet. Before and after. more of an extreme edit to this one, but I'm okay with that. It's okay to do 1 or 2 extreme edits. So this photo is about the same as the last photo, except there's more, I see there's more road exposed on this one, which I didn't really notice at the time of taking this photo. So I'm going to crop out the details of that fish habitat and get more of this road in the shot. And so you can see this ice in the middle here is kind of lumped up, and that's from it kind of washing over Old Route 220, which goes down into the lake. So in this view here, I wish I would have noticed this yesterday. I would have paid more attention to it. But you can see how the underwater road kind of still interacts with the surface of the ice. Paste in my previous settings, and probably going to need to lower the exposure again. And I'm going to put the temperature down to give it more of a winter feel and not so much of that sunset feel. And maybe that needs straightened up a little bit. I think the top of that dam should be level.
I hope it's level.
So this was a shot from my vehicle here, and I didn't think it was going to turn out that great, and it didn't. But I was curious to see, I saw him reaching into the ice, so I didn't know if he was going to be pulling out a fish or not. So I'm going to skip that photo, no use really for that one. And here you can see him reaching for his line. Again, I missed the focus on this one somehow. Could have been from the vehicle's engine and RPMs kind of distracting my stability on the camera. So here's another guy reaching for his line or the fishing pole, which again, I didn't really turn up on the detail or the focus. This shot was taken at a windy location, which I think that's the reason some of this ice is kind of blurry, because the wind is blowing on the surface of the ice, which had a little bit of snow on it. But it's too bad I missed the details on that one. I'll skip that photo as well.
I think that was the windiest spot.
Yeah, we were at this location for probably a good 5 or 10 minutes before we were able to get the video in with no wind in the background. The next photo is a quick shot of Beach Creek. Nothing creative here, just for documenting purposes. Just showing how much Beach Creek is frozen over with the unusual amount of ice we've been having this year.
It's still pretty frozen.
Let's see what the previous settings look like. Lower the exposure. Maybe I'll crop out some of them details on the left side to give the photo more seclusion without the distraction of that house and whatever sign that is.
There's a sign?
Actually, I'll leave that sign in.
Oh, that
might be
like
a
driveway sign.
Slow down sign. Speed limit 8 miles an hour. It's kind of an odd speed limit.
Better than 1.2?
Maybe 8's their lucky number. Maybe I'll switch it over to a vertical shot. Maybe I can get a better. In this case, I would do this separately. I would do the horizontal shot, save the photo, export it, and then come back and do the vertical shot again. That way you have a horizontal and a vertical. Even though I should have took 2 photos and actually did a vertical shot this way. But this was just a quick shot. This is not far from where I live. It's kind of on the bridge. So not much creativeness going on here other than just quickly looking at the ice on the creek. Beach Creek has no wildlife.
It might have birds.
And then here I manually zoomed in to get more of a secluded feel to it and get the house cropped out. And you see more texture on the ice on the creek upstream where it's kind of bunched up. And there's also some rapids up there too. So the ice is kind of getting pushed around the boulders and rocks that have been sticking out of the water up there. I don't think I'm going to use this shot. And the next shot was just to show some litter in the waterway. I'm not sure if these potted plants got blown into the creek here, but there was a few of them. One was actually up in the tree. So, and I would hope people wouldn't throw their potted plants into nature. You could spread invasive plants that way. Harmful pests can get into the environment then. So I'm just going to hope that these were kind of blown out of someone's yard and not thrown there purposely. And yeah, as Missy pointed out, the plastic is harmful for the environment as well.
If I could, I'd go get them. But I wouldn't.
So I'm going to go back through these photos. I'm going to give 1-star rating to every photo that I edited. And some of these ones that I liked, I might give a 2 or a 3-star rating. And then I'm going to compare them all once I give them all a 1-star rating. Ones that I know I want to use, I might give them a 2-star rating. I think this black and white one I'll give a 2-star rating because it's kind of cool. And I did the color pop on the red. I'll give that a 2-star rating just because it stands out. Not the best example, but cool for a quick shot. And once I get all these rated, you'll see why I rate the ones that I've edited or want to use for maybe a Facebook post or a future publication of some sort. And these 2 creative shots here, I'm going to automatically give a 2-star rating. They were pretty much the only scene that I chose to do creatively. It really stood out while I was there on the scene. So I took a little bit of extra time and made sure I had all my settings right for them photos. You can see I took all these extra photos that didn't turn out on that scene. So here are the mallards. This is just a documenting photo. Just wanted to show that I did see some mallards at the location. Nothing creative or fancy. This hybrid duck here is pretty cool, but I kind of missed the settings here and it's really cropped in, so not the best photo for quality. So this photo here I did post today on my Facebook. I thought this was really cool to show the parents and the offspring of hybrid ducks from the pekin and the mallard. So that's probably one of my favorite photos from this album, so I'll give that a 3-star rating. And the rest have already been rated. All right. So after I get all my edits done and I have the ratings in, I go back to library and I will sort my photos by the rating. So now my highest rated photo will be way at the top, and everything else will be under. So a couple of the 2-star rated photos underneath it, and then my 1-star rated photos afterwards. And so if I go down to the final rated photo, which is photo number 28. So that means I picked out 28 photos from 60, and I can narrow it down from there even more. If one of these 1-star ratings is actually really good, like this scene from Lock Haven here, it's a really nice landscape scene with that building towards the top of the photo. I'm actually going to put that up to a 3-star rated photo to put it all the way at the top. I'm definitely going to want to use that in my post. These creative shots with the geese, I'm going to put the 3-star to put them at the top. The color pop, I'll give 3 stars. And from here I can filter them out even more. Like, let's say, what photo should I use first in the post, which is always important. Your first 5 photos are going to be looked at by the majority of people that scroll by your Facebook feed. So you want to make sure your first 5 photos are your best photos. I know my girlfriend Missy likes to do all of her photos in order, so she will have all her photos in order. I'm the opposite. I like my photos to kind of be out of order on purpose a lot of times. There's a couple of reasons for that. Again, like I already said, I want my first 5 photos to be the best photos that I've taken for that album. But also, I like to kind of conceal my locations and kind of conceal the order of my locations sometimes, especially when it comes to wildlife. So there's some trickery, and maybe let's say your album's going to be called the West Branch Watershed, because all of these photos are taken in the West Branch Watershed, even though there was 3 or 4 different locations in that. And so that kind of conceals the exact location. Or let's say if I wanted to highlight Fishing Creek, which I was at, maybe the post will say something like Fishing Creek, the West Branch Susquehanna River, and Watershed. And so then I can throw photos in from some other nearby areas like Bald Eagle Creek, which for whatever reason, maybe there was a very unique bird on Bald Eagle Creek, or a nice underwater shot of a fish. I'm kind of leaving Bald Eagle Creek out of it, but still not necessarily lying in my post because they are from the area. So I'm going to select all of the photos I want to use for the post, which was up to 28 photos. Highlight them all, and then go to File, Export. Or if you're on PC, you would use Control-Shift-E as a shortcut. And I do utilize my user presets on these. It'll already have my watermark selected. I do have to change it to 25 manually because I didn't make one for this year yet. So I changed my watermark to the selected watermark. I have a couple of options. I use a Get Lost Photography watermark, mostly for photos that I will post to my website. And I use mkinney25 for photos that I post to Facebook. And you can have a lot of these in there, and maybe I'll go over that in maybe a future live stream. But I am just about out of time today, so I'm going to export these, and I do choose a folder for every time I export. I choose a new folder. New folder, we'll call this January 27th Ice Streams. Open that folder. And then the other settings I don't really mess with too much except for the resize to fit. I choose long edge, and I put the long edge for my Facebook post to 2048 pixels on the long edge. And if anything's smaller than that, I check mark this don't enlarge. So if anything is already smaller than that, I don't want Lightroom to enlarge it. I want to keep it at the size it's already at. But most of the photos are going to be way larger than that. And I would rather have Lightroom reduce the size rather than Facebook automatically reduce my size, which kind of distorts the image a lot. So if you're getting distorted images on your Facebook compared to what you've edited them at, that could be the reason why, is Facebook compresses all the large images to meet the Facebook standards. So tell Lightroom to lower the quality of your image before you put it on Facebook. They do a lot better job than Facebook. So export them photos, and that was it. I probably spent twice as much time as I usually do editing one day's worth of photos, mostly because I did a lot of explanations on my editing today. But if you're interested in watching future edits of my photography, subscribe to my YouTube channel and make sure the bell is turned on, and that should notify you if I go live in the future. And that kind of gives you a heads up or a first peek at the photos that I will be posting to my Facebook page. Thanks for watching, and just in time, the video is glitching, so that will be my cue to end the stream.